LoveLore Library. Chapter 408. Then I will go back first. Ji Chu. Yes, master. TSK. This person has gone far. Did his soul follow him? Hong Fui crossed his arms and walked out of the room. He stopped in front of the man and teased him. Mo Wusheng didn't look at him. Go back. I will not go with you. Hey. Hong Fui squinted his eyes dangerously. Mo Wusheng, what do you mean? You promised to go back with me. Why should I go back alone? I will not be able to explain to the Empress Dowager. He saw that Mo Wusheng was about to leave and quickly walked over to stop him. Mo Wusheng, have you forgotten your identity? Have you forgotten your mission? After staying in the Phone Kingdom for so many years, do you really think of yourself as a citizen of the Phone Kingdom? Looking at the man's indifferent black eyes, Hong Fui's face turned cold. Did you fall in love with that woman just now? The answer was non-committal. The man raised his eyebrows. Hong Fui looked at him in disbelief. What about Gu Yuqin? Did you fall in love with Gu Yuqin? No. I know that Gu Yuqin was harmed because of the Empress Dowager. If you didn't leave Feng Nation at that time, perhaps that woman wouldn't have died at all. However, you have to remember that a person with a big goal shouldn't be tied down by love. Wusheng, there are millions of people in the North Underworld. Are you going to watch them rely on an environment without a leader? The man didn't speak but walked past him with a cold face. Hong Fui frowned. The Empress Dowager ordered you to leave with me tonight and rush back to the Northern Underworld. Otherwise. He paused for a moment. I know I can't beat you, but I will use all my strength to tie you up and bring you back. If you like that woman just now, I can tie her up for you and bring her back to the North Underworld. You can do whatever you want. Wusheng, Gu Yuqin is dead. Now the North Underworld needs you. You have been fighting with the Empress Dowager for so long. It's enough. Don't forget that she is your mother, your biological mother. Don't touch her. If you dare to touch her, I will not let you go easily. After saying this, the man turned around and entered the room. Hong Fui wanted to follow, but just as he was about to step into the room, a strong inner force came from the room, and the door closed with a bang. Fortunately, he reacted in time. He quickly took a few steps back and narrowly avoided getting his nose smashed. The Empress Dowager is your mother. During the time you were away from the Northern Underworld, she has been helping you with the affairs of the palace. The Empress Dowager is old and can't manage much for you. The Northern Underworld is your country. The ministers in the court and the people in the capital are all your people. If you continue to be stubborn like this, when the time comes. I've said it before, in my heart, even the millions of innocent people in the North Underworld. The door was pushed open, revealing the man's handsome and natural facial features. His indifferent aura was daunting. His facial features were perfect and flawless, like a sculpture. His hands were behind his back, and his loose black robe made him look like a statue of a god. He looked at him disdainfully, and spoke slowly, but it revealed endless determination and undeniability. It's not even comparable to a hair of hers. But she's dead. Hong Fui's heart was cold. Even if she was a dead person now, her position in his heart was still so heavy that it had never changed. I just feel that your master has been hiding too much from me. I'm a narrow-minded person and I can't tolerate anyone lying to me. Furthermore, your master has promised me that he would never hide anything from me. If she hadn't bumped into him tonight, she probably wouldn't have known who Hong Fui was. She also wouldn't have known that Hong Fui was actually in contact with the people of the North Underworld. There are some things that Master doesn't want Miss Shen to know for her own good. After all, Miss Shen is a woman. The things about the Northern Sea and the Phoenix Nation. Chapter 4:10. Ji Chu understood the meaning of her words and subconsciously tightened the reins. Miss Shin. Don't worry, I won't think too much. I won't say what I shouldn't say either. After all, what I have in my heart is just a guess. Let me down at the inn in front. Master has ordered me to send Miss Shin back to the general's mansion. Ji Chu was about to urge the horse to move. Shin Yueji frowned. The general's mansion is at the corner in front. If I'm in danger, I can just shout and the people in the general's mansion will hear me. After all, you are a secret guard of the regent's mansion. You are always exposed when you are with the regent. Moreover, the emperor brought many people. Do you want the emperor to suspect me? Hearing her words, Ji Chu didn't dare to be stubborn anymore. He stopped the carriage in front of the inn. Miss Shin, please. After getting off the carriage, Shin Yueji glanced at him and nodded. You can go back. Yes. After Ji Chu left, Shin Yueji didn't return to the general's mansion directly. Instead, she looked at the inn in front of her, hesitated for a moment, and walked in. Because it was the middle of the night and the sky was almost bright, there were no customers. When she entered, she could only see the flickering candlelight and blurry figures. But two familiar figures by the window caught her eyes first. She found an inconspicuous place. When the waiter came to greet her, she put a silver ingot on the table and signaled him to be quiet. The waiter happily took the silver and carefully retreated. Father, you have been here for a day. It's time to go back. A handsome man in a white robe was expressionless. His black eyes were locked on the drunk middle-aged man opposite him. He frowned and something flashed across his dark eyes. He grabbed the wine jar. Father is the first-grade Prime Minister of Feng Country. If you are seen by others, how can you behave? First-grade Prime Minister. Ha! Gu Wei sneered. Why don't I remember that I am still the first-grade Prime Minister of Feng Country? He grabbed the wine jar from Gu Mujue. If I don't go back, why should I go back? To face your mother's unpleasant face. No matter what I do, she won't like me. No matter what I do, I'm the selfish one. I'm the cruel one. I'm the one who does everything. Ju, tell me, why is your mother so cruel? It's been more than 20 years. In these 20 years, I gave her whatever she wanted. Even if she didn't want it, I would try my best to get it for her and personally offer it to her. But in the end, she regards it as a treasure, a priceless treasure. Not to mention liking it, even looking at it is an insult to her eyes. I am a high position. I am the first-grade Prime Minister of Feng Country. I can't get what I want. Even the current emperor has to give me some face. Which of the officials lower than me doesn't have 3 or 4 wives? What about me? I only guarded her. Even though she was old and faded, I still did not take a concubine. She, on the other hand, can't wait for me to take concubines. When I don't want them, she drugged me, stripped those women and sent them to my bed. She wants me to have concubines. She drugged me when I didn't want them. She stripped them and sent them to my bed. But this time, the words that came out of his mouth did not stop, as if he was pouring out all the grievances and unwillingness in his heart. Chapter 4:11. Ha! I'm raising someone else's bastard for her. What did I say? She. Gu Wei gulped down a few mouthfuls of wine when he mentioned the sad past. Shin Yueji wasn't in the mood to listen to them talking about the past. She just found it strange that they were still in the inn in the middle of the night. She didn't expect to hear this. At that moment, her hands were cold. An indescribable emotion overflowed and she tightened her hands on the table. What did he mean by Murongyun being unmarried and pregnant? What did he mean by he was raising another man's bastard for Murong-yun? She wasn't Gu Wei's child. Before Murong-yun married him, he was already pregnant with her. Thinking of her childhood in the Prime Minister's mansion, Gu Wei's love and indulgence among all the children, but she was the only one he didn't like. Shin Yueji finally understood that she wasn't his flesh and blood. It wasn't just because Murong-yun didn't like her, so he didn't like her either. It was because she wasn't born by him, she was born by Murong-yun and another man. According to Gu Wei's arrogance, how could he treat the woman he liked and the child born by another man? There was a teapot on the table. She felt her mouth was dry and poured a cup into her mouth. Then she poured a second cup. She was just curious when she saw them here, but she didn't expect to hear this. Speaking of which, Gu Yuqin is really pitiful. If it wasn't because her mother was pregnant with her, she might have eloped with that man and I wouldn't have anything to do with it. Her mother didn't like her and she was a bastard born by another man. How could I like her? Every time I see Yun beating and humiliating her, I'm happy. That little bitch. It's a pity that she died too early. I didn't even have the chance to vent the hatred in my heart before she passed away so early. What a pity. When she mentioned Gu Yuqin, Gu Mujue's dark eyes suddenly contracted. For a moment, the atmosphere in the inn dropped a lot. But Gu Wei didn't seem to feel it. He was still smiling coldly. Gu Yuqin looked so much like that man, so much like him. He murmured and then drank a few mouthfuls of wine. Gu Mujue's deep gaze fell on the countless empty jars on the coffee table. The big hand under the brocade robe couldn't help but tighten. He went to help Gu Wei up. Father, you're drunk. I'll send you back. I'm not drunk. I'm not going back. You want me to go back and face your mother's cold face? Let me stay here, He let out a drunken belch. His vision became hazy and he fell asleep on the table. From the beginning to the end, Gu Mujue didn't say anything unnecessary. Instead, she supported Gu Wei and walked out. When he reached the door, Shin Yueji didn't know if it was an illusion, but he purposely paused. When Shin Yueji looked up again, the man was already far away. She pinched her eyebrows and glanced at the jars of wine on the table. He stood up and left. But just when she walked to the door, the man in front of her was dressed in white, his handsome face indifferent, expressionlessly looking at her. Shin Yueji knew that the pause she felt was not an illusion. He stood there. Although he didn't block her way, when Shin Yueji walked forward, he deliberately moved his feet. His intention was obvious. How much did you hear? Chapter 4:12. The man's eyes were indifferent without any extra emotion. His short sentence didn't have any emotional fluctuations. She understood that he was talking about what she had heard just now. Shin Yueji took a step back and leaned against the door. She looked at him up and down. What should I say? If I say I didn't hear it, first young Master Gu may not believe me. But if I say I heard it, will first young Master Gu kill me? Speaking of which, it's really quite shocking. No wonder your entire Gu family doesn't like Gu Yuqin, she's a child that Madame Murong had with another man. But since Madame Murong was pregnant with Gu Yuqin first, why does Gu Yuqin call you brother? In terms of age, shouldn't she be a few years older than you? As long as she could remember, Gu Mujue had existed in the Gu family. After hearing what Gu Wei said when he was drunk, Shin Yueji suspected that Gu Mujue was only 1 year older than her. If she was the child of Murong Yun and another man, then what about him? He was also Murong Yun's flesh and blood. He was born 1 year earlier than her. Was he also Gu Wei's child? Seeing the man's cold and lonely lips were almost pressed into a straight line. Shin Yueji smiled slightly. First young Master Gu is angry. Imperial concubine Shin, I hope you can keep this matter in your heart forever. There is no wall in the world that doesn't have a crack. I don't like to keep things in my heart. First, young master wants me to keep it in my heart, but I won't let it rot in my heart. Not only that, I will also tell others about it. At that time, the whole capital will be talking about Madame Mourong and Prime Minister Gu married. The man interrupted her in a low voice. He clenched his fists under his long sleeves. Yuqin has no grudge against you. If you do this, her reputation will be ruined. A wild girl born by a slut didn't even know who her biological father was. Gu Yuqin had a bad reputation when she was alive. After her death, the rumors about her had died down a lot. If something like this happened to the Gu family at this time, she would be mentioned again. Yuqin. Shen Yueji looked at him amusedly. Was the relationship between the late empress and young master very good? Why did I hear that when the late empress was being beaten by Madame Mourong's men, you were just watching coldly from the side? Don't even mention stopping her, you even turned a blind eye to the late empress begging you for help. What? Now you know how to care for your sister? From the looks of it, the late empress doesn't seem to be your sister, young master. A chill suddenly burst out from the man's body, wishing that it could freeze people 3 feet. Shen Yueji smiled faintly, showing no signs of weakness. Just based on her status alone, no matter how harsh her words were, even if it didn't reach Gu Mujue's ears, she could be sure that he wouldn't dare to do anything to her. Shen Yueji took a step forward. If it had been anyone else here today, as long as it wasn't me, surely young Master Gu would have already killed her. Gu Mujue didn't say anything. She looked at her with her dark eyes. Your Gu family and my Shen family have always been at odds with each other in the capital. You still want me to help you hide it? She laughed coldly. Doesn't young Master Gu think that this is too wishful thinking? Her gaze subconsciously swept towards the wooden fox carving hanging on his waist. Chapter 413. His bloodless thin lips were pursed into a straight line. After a long time, she heard his cold voice. You can state your conditions. Shen Yueji stretched out her white hand. Okay, this is what young master said. Give me the wooden fox in your hand, and I will pretend that nothing happened tonight, and I have not heard anything. She accurately saw the killing intent flashing in the man's eyes. Shen Yueji smiled. What? You are not willing. Gu Mujue clenched the little fox in his hand. Why it? Seeing young Master Gu so nervous, I think this little fox is very important to you. Gold and silver jewelry are rare treasures in the world. According to my identity, I naturally do not lack them. On the contrary, the little fox worn by young Master Gu's waist is very attractive to me. I just don't know how sincere young Master Gu is. Young Master Gu. Shen Yueji suddenly approached him. In an instant, his nose was filled with the fresh fragrance of a young girl. The man frowned. Shen Yueji stood on tiptoe and blew hot air into his ear. It was ticklish and numb, with a giggle. I kindly remind young Master Gu that the emperor returned to the capital this time and brought back a monk. It seems that intentionally or unintentionally, he wants to replace your Gu family's position in the court. What did you say? Shen Yueji shrugged slightly. How can you and I, an imperial concubine and a minister, see through the emperor's mind? Now, the Gu and Shen families are like the sun and the sky in the capital. The emperor is afraid, so he wants to get rid of them. Young Master Gu is a smart man. Sometimes, just by looking at a person, he can see their thoughts and thoughts. As for the emperor, you have followed him for so many years, it seems that you should understand him a little. Imperial concubine Shen told me this. Aren't you afraid that I will expose you to the emperor? You won't. Shen Yueji's bright eyes flickered a few times. If it was anyone in your Gu family, they would, but young Master Gu, you won't. I can see that you seem to dislike the emperor. She already knew that Gu Mujue did not like Feng Jiuqing. On the surface, he was still respectful, but in reality, every time they met, the respect in his eyes did not reach the depths of his eyes. Instead, there was a layer of coldness. Even yesterday at the general's mansion, after Feng Jiuqing appeared, he did not say a word. His dark eyes seemed to be covered with a layer of frost. In the past, Shen Yueji did not understand why Gu Mujue hated Feng Jiuqing so much. After she married Feng Jiuqing, she hated him for a long time because of Gu Mujue's dislike of Feng Jiuqing. Now, when she looked at him again, she didn't find him so annoying. Really? The corners of the man's lips lifted and he sneered. Although I don't like your Gu family, eldest young master is much better than those unreasonable people in the Gu family. That's why I'm still willing to talk to eldest young master. Why do you think the emperor's thoughts are so hard to understand? The important ministers of the two families are willing to sacrifice their lives for him. Their loyalty is so great that they want to dig out their hearts and show it to him. He, on the other hand, is still blindly suspicious and jealous, and even wants to get rid of him. By doing so, who knows how many officials' hearts have turned cold. Chapter 4:14. Young Master Gu, don't be so direct. This is not a cooperative relationship. I mean to protect our Shen family and the Gu family. What does the life and death of the Gu family have to do with me? The cold and decisive words made the smile on Shen Yueji's face freeze for a moment. What did Gu Mujue mean? Was he not a member of the Gu family? It was as if he saw the surprise on her face that she did not have time to hide. The man put one hand behind his back and stared at her for a while. If it is a cooperative relationship between us, I can consider it. If it is for the sake of the Gu and Shen families, then there is no need to mention it. Compared to the Gu and Shen families, Shen Yueji actually hoped to cooperate alone. In this way, the Shen family would not be involved and would not face danger. However, Gu Mujue's indifference to the Gu family's life and death was somewhat beyond her expectations. However, knowing his character, Shen Yueji didn't press him further. She still had some trust in Gu Mujue. He was different from those people in the Gu family who went back on their words. As long as he promised, he would definitely do it. He would never go back on his word, even if the two of them were on opposite sides. Shen Yueji suddenly twitched her lips and smiled. Well, since young Master Gu is so straightforward, then it is a personal cooperation between us. It has nothing to do with the Gu and Shen families, but I don't know. She paused. When the time comes, will young Master Gu be biased? I will do what I say. Since I have promised young Master Shen, I will not go back on my word. I know what Imperial Consort wants. Perhaps Imperial Consort doesn't know what I want now, but sooner or later, you'll know. Gu Mujue was indifferent. Shen Yueji really did not know what he wanted. He said he wanted the throne, but he was so indifferent to it. He said he wanted something else, but with his status, what could he not have? However, the fact that he agreed to cooperate with her so readily meant that Shen Yueji smiled slightly. At that time, if Prime Minister Gu wants to do anything to the Shen family, I hope young Master Gu can inform me. As long as the Shen family is honest, the Gu family will not do anything. Young Master Gu, what benefits do you want from me? Just say it. You only need to inform me of His Majesty's movements. You don't need to do anything else. Actually, young Master has found the wrong person regarding the Emperor's movements. I think that the Empress should be the clearest about it. If young Master wants to know about the Emperor's movements, when she saw the man's handsome brows, she suddenly narrowed her eyes, as if she was impatient. Shen Yueji nodded. All right. He returned from the inn. It was already dawn. Shen Yueji thought about it along the way. Why did she suddenly cooperate with Gu Mujue? It was completely subconscious. She couldn't fight against Feng Zhiqing by herself. Moreover, Mo Wuxiang was hiding something from her. He probably had a lot of things to do as well. She didn't want to disturb him at this time and distract him. In addition, Feng Zhiqing wanted to get rid of the Gu and Shen clans. The Gu clan was extremely loyal, and if Feng Zhiqing did not reveal his true colors, they would not believe him at all. However, Feng Zhiqing was the kind of person who, even if you were dead, would still think that he was a good person, a sage. She took a deep breath and recalled what Gu Mujue had said to her before she left. Sometimes, if necessary, she really needed to cooperate with Gu Mujue. The man's palm was dry and warm. When his smooth fingers pinched her nose, his movements were extremely gentle, as if he was afraid of hurting her. She followed him back to the house. Shen Yueji poured him a cup of water. Emperor, this concubine saw the monk you brought back last night. Oh. The movement of the man's hand paused, and then he took the tea that she handed him as if nothing had happened just now. Did the imperial concubine see him? Chapter 4:16. The man smiled and put down the teacup in his hand. In recent days, the rumors about the late empress have been spreading in the court. Jin needs to ask Master Kong Yin to do a ceremony. When he mentioned Gu Yuqin, she could see the obvious pain in his eyes. It appeared quickly and disappeared quickly as well. It was fleeting. In Shen Yueji's words, it was just right. Shen Yueji restrained the obscurity in her eyes. Didn't His Majesty say that he doesn't believe in these nonsense? Why? Asking Kong Yin is just an explanation to the people in the palace. The man took a sip of tea. It's dawn. Does Imperial Consort have anything to say to General Shen and Shen Furen? She knew that Feng Zhiqing was giving her a chance to say goodbye to Shen He and Shen Qiu. She hesitated for a moment but still nodded. Father and mother know that His Majesty is going back to the palace today. I will go and remind them. N. After leaving the room, Shen Yueji went all the way to Shen Qiu's room. She saw that both of them were dressed neatly, especially Shen He, who looked high-spirited. She frowned with some dissatisfaction. Father, did you forget that you are sick? How can His Majesty think that you are really sick when you look like this? That's right. It's all your fault. I almost forgot about it. Shen Qiu had been well nourished last night and almost forgot that Shen He's attire was too incompatible. She ordered him to lie on the bed again. Shen He looked at them worriedly. Daughter, His Majesty is going back to the palace. Do you think His Majesty will be angry if Father lies down like this? No, His Majesty knows that Father is sick, so he doesn't need to get up to send him off. His Majesty asked me to come here to inform Father and Mother that there is no need to follow so many rules. His Majesty is going out incognito, so he should go back incognito. Shen Qiu understood her words. All right, Mother understands. Must be very careful when you go back. This time you are going out with His Majesty. I don't know how that little girl of the Gu family will bear a grudge against you. You must be more vigilant. If you can't handle it, then close the palace and wait for Father and Mother to rush over to save you. Mother Shen's love, whether it was in her heart or in her eyes, was undisguised. Shen Yueji's heart softens. She looks at her mother and smiles. Mother, don't worry. Your daughter will be fine. Not only your daughter, but also the Shen family. As long as your daughter is alive, the Shen family will never fall. Shen He wiped his tears in relief. Even after she had walked far away, his tears still hadn't stopped. Shen Qiu sat on the bed and looked at the man who usually shed blood on the battlefield without shedding tears. It's all our fault for protecting too well. I don't know what kind of grievances she suffered in the palace, but she suddenly grew up. She felt gratified and sad at the same time. Tell me, what is Ji thinking? I can clearly feel that her dependence on the regent is much deeper than that of the emperor. Why does she still want to enter the palace? Isn't it better to stay at home when you marry the prince regent? What do you know? Our daughter is eating from the bowl while looking at the pot. You have to choose a man like this. You have to try for a long time to see which one is good and which one is suitable. Hearing this, Shinchio couldn't help but glare at him. You talk too much. Every day you talk about your big principles. I don't know what kind of nonsense you are talking about. Chapter 4:17. Speaking of Shinjuichi, Shinchio also looked sad. Who do you think our son is like? He's so useless. How good would it be if he was half as good as Ji-er? He cries for Ji-er all day long. Who would dare to marry him in the future? Speaking of which, Shinchio paused. Old thing, Yuechi is not young anymore. Have you thought about it? What kind of woman can you find for him to suppress him? Still able to suppress him? Shenhe rolled his eyes at her. It's good enough that you don't despise him. Although our Shen family is a family of generals and there is no shortage of wives, no woman dares to marry Shin Yueqi. When I raised Shuangxi, I planned to take her as my daughter-in-law in the future. Who knew that this little girl was so smart? She knew my plan and immediately followed Ji-er to Porti. She also became sworn sisters with Yueqi. Thinking of that scene, Shinhe couldn't help but have a headache and scolded Shin Yueqi several times. This fool. Li Yingying was finally taken back to the palace by Shin Yueji. When getting on the carriage, she deliberately let Li Yingying ride in the same carriage with them and specially asked Feng Zhuqing for his opinion. The man was reading at that time. After hearing her words, the big palm on the book seemed to pause slightly, and then he chuckled. As you say. After Li Yingying got on the carriage, she bowed carefully and respectfully. And the man also talked and laughed with Shin Yueji as if she didn't exist in the carriage. When it came to calligraphy and some musical skills, she really couldn't compare with Li Yingying. When she signaled Li Yingying to interrupt, the man finally looked at her. Perhaps Li Yingying's answer satisfied Feng Zhuqing. When the man looked at her, there was a gentle smile on his lips. Being stared at by the man like this, Li Yingying couldn't help blushing. The gentleman was like an immortal from the heavens, gentle and elegant. He treated people gently and didn't have the airs of an emperor at all. He was more like a gentle son of a noble family. He treated people warmly and courteously. This concubine also just found out that Miss Li is also the daughter of an illustrious aristocratic family. It's only because of some accidents that your family has fallen into such dire straits. In terms of musical skills, Miss Li is much better than this concubine. The moment their eyes met, Shin Yueji seemed to see her past self in Feng Zhuqing's gentle eyes. She still remembered that when she first met Feng Zhuqing, he had looked at her with this kind of gaze. When a man looked directly at a woman, the woman would feel a little uncomfortable. However, although Feng Zhuqing's gaze was looking at a person, it was not ostentatious and direct. In the depths of his pitch-black eyes, there was a polite smile. From time to time, there would be a faint smile on his gentle lips. Whether it was a beautiful girl or a married woman, his gaze would never make people feel rushed. How could Feng Zhuqing not understand her intentions when faced with her words that had a hidden meaning? He chuckled in a low voice. When did the concubine become as considerate as the empress? Recruiting for the emperor's harem was usually something only the empress would do. Gu Yueyin was clearly disgusted by this rule, but she still had to pretend to be magnanimous as she recruited for Feng Zhuqing's harem, taking in all the beautiful women in the world. Chapter 4:19. She saw that her wrist was red and bruised. She could imagine how much strength Shinriching used to hold her just now. Thinking of this, she was secretly surprised. How could she lose her composure to such an extent? Does Imperial Consort like His Majesty? That's why you... No. Shin Yueji interrupted her decisively. She was sure that even if she lost her composure because of Feng Juqing, it was not because she liked him. It was because she knew what she was thinking just now. Li Yingying protected her wrist. His Majesty was a rare handsome man. He treated people gently and elegantly. When he talked to people, he looked into her eyes. It did not make people feel that he looked down on her at all. Li Yingying had to admit that she was indeed moved. Even when the horse went out of control just now, it was not because she was afraid, but because it was subconscious. But she did all this according to Shin Yueji's instructions. Didn't Shin Yueji bring her to the palace to seduce the emperor? Although Li Yingying did not understand why Shin Yueji lost her composure just now, she had a woman's intuition that it was because of the emperor. When she raised her head and looked at Shin Yueji again, she found that Shin Yueji's eyes were not on her at all. She did not know when, but she had already lifted the curtain of the carriage and looked outside. Countless black-clothed men descended from the sky, covering the sky and surrounding the carriage. Feng Juqing was surrounded by the men in black, and behind him were the secret guards in brocade clothes she brought. Qiu Yang faced 4 or 5 men in black, but he was not at a disadvantage at all. But as time went by, his strength was consumed and he was wounded in several places. Since her previous life, Shin Yueji rarely saw Feng Juqing show his martial arts in front of so many people. He alone could deal with more than 10 black-clothed men, and he was not inferior at all. Dressed in a white robe, he was as elegant as an immortal. When he was fighting with the black-clothed man, his moves were swift and elegant like the wind. Before the black-clothed man could react, his palm wind was like lightning, quickly ending the black-clothed man's life. The way out of the broken intestine cliff was blocked. At this moment, they were on the highest slope of the broken intestine cliff. The appearance of the black-robed men was like an endless river, coming wave after wave. When the black-robed men were all killed, many more black-robed men appeared out of nowhere. The group of men in black that Feng Juqing brought hiding in the dark had already been injured. Just at this moment, Shin Yueji saw a black-robed man sneaking up on Feng Juqing, who was focused on fighting against the black-robed man. As for the man, it was unclear whether he had noticed it or not. The scene before her eyes overlapped with the scene from her past life. Chapter 420. Shin Yueji decisively put down the curtain of the carriage. Breaking free from her hand, Li Yingying looked at her in disbelief. "Your Highness, just now, there was a sneak attack on the Emperor from behind. Why did you see it? Why didn't you warn the Emperor?" If Shin Yueji didn't warn her, it would be fine. But why did Shin Yueji suddenly reach out to grab her and cover her mouth when she opened her mouth to warn her? For a moment, Li Yingying felt that the woman in front of her hated the Emperor and wanted him to die. This made her think that Shin Yueji lost her composure and scratched her hand when the Emperor hugged her. These two views were different. Hearing this, Shin Yueji raised her eyebrows and didn't show any panic on her face. "Doesn't Miss Li know that in this dangerous moment, even if you see it, you can't open your mouth to warn me?" "What?" Li Yingying looked at her in confusion. Shin Yueji looked back at her with a faint smile. "If you shout, the Emperor will be distracted." When the Emperor was fighting with the men in black, he was very focused. His martial arts is so high, how could he not know that there was someone behind him? If the Emperor knew, he wouldn't have been stabbed. No matter how high a person's martial arts is, it can't be compared to a large number of people. "Does Miss Li know the consequences if you shout?" Those men in black are obviously going to attack the Emperor and don't know that there is someone else in the carriage. No matter what, the Emperor will not abandon his woman. Even if Miss Li is still by my side as my maidservant, he will not let an innocent woman take risks. However, if you make a sound, the black-clothed men will know that there is someone else in the carriage. If they want to deal with the Emperor, who is highly skilled in martial arts, it will be troublesome enough. Even if there is an endless stream of men in black, there will be an end. When all the men in black die, it will be over. But if they know that we are here, they will change their camp and catch us first. At that time, we will become hostages in the hands of the black-clothed men. At that time, not only will we be a burden to the Emperor, but even the Emperor will also become a fish on the black-clothed men's iron plate because of us. Or is this the result that you want to see, Miss Li? Li Yingying had never thought that her momentary worry for the Emperor would be seen by Shen Yueji. After listening to her words, it would immediately change. Unfortunately, she couldn't refute Shen Yueji's words. She unexpectedly felt a lingering fear and annoyance. She regretted making a sound just now. She didn't dare to believe that if she made a sound in a moment of desperation, not only would it distract the Emperor, but it would also make the black-clothed man realize that they were in the carriage. At that time, the Emperor would be forced into a passive situation. Your Highness, she knelt in front of Shen Yueji with lingering fear. It's all my fault. It's all my fault for not being considerate enough. That's why. I almost harmed His Majesty and you. I'm guilty. Please punish me. Chapter 421. I'm afraid he has already rushed over to help His Majesty. The sound of fighting outside was still going on. Feng Zhiqing was injured, and some of the men in black wanted to step forward, but they were hesitant. Li Yingying's heart was completely focused on Feng Zhiqing, so she naturally didn't notice the strangeness of the men in black. Sitting in the carriage, Shen Yueji's eyes were tightly locked on the group of men in black. Seeing their hesitation, her lips curved into a smile. Just as Li Yingying was hesitating about what to do, she half opened the curtain and revealed her head, which was noticed by the men in black. Immediately, many of them abandoned the young emperor and waved the sharp swords in their hands to stab them. Li Yingying was so scared that her beautiful face turned pale, and the color had long changed. She should have screamed subconsciously, but because of Shen Yueji's words, she found that she couldn't make a sound even though her mouth was open. Seeing Li Yingying like this, Shen Yueji almost laughed out loud. At the critical moment, she saw that the men in black attacked decisively and fiercely, with the posture of taking Li Yingying's life. Frowning, she immediately pulled Li Yingying's arm and used her back to block the attack. Your Highness. Li Yingying was shocked and finally cried out uncontrollably. Not far away, Feng Zhiqing also noticed them when he heard this cry. The men in black attacked very quickly and didn't show any mercy at all. It was precisely because the person opposite him was Li Yingying that he planned to take her life with one sword, and then use Shen Yueji as a hostage. It was killing two birds with one stone. But he had never thought that Shen Yueji would actually hand over his back for a woman and bear this sword for her. For a moment, it was difficult to withdraw the sword. Until the long sword was almost about to pierce Shen Yueji's body, the men in black forgot to withdraw. A gust of wind swept past her eyes. Poochie, the sound of the long sword cutting into flesh. Shen Yueji was pulled into a warm embrace, and the man's muffled groan came from above her head. A faint smell of blood came from the man's body. Shen Yueji looked at the corner of the snow-white robe that was dyed red with blood, and tears immediately fell. Your Majesty. She was distressed and helpless, and even looked at the Emperor in front of her with fear. Your Majesty, she was very careful, not daring to touch the wound on his arm. Her tears immediately fell. Emperor, how could you be so stupid? This minister's concubine's life is so lowly, how could you use your body to block it? If something happened to you, what would this minister's concubine do? She sobbed softly. Feng Zhiqing hugged her and stood at the edge of the cliff. They were cornered by the men in black. The scene from her previous life repeated once again. The man carefully protected her behind him. His tall and slender body was covered with countless wounds, but it did not show that he was in a sorry state. He stared intently at the men in black who were approaching them. Whatever you want, come at me. It has nothing to do with her. In this short period of time, a lot of things could happen, without exception. Shen Yueji knew that Feng Zhiqing's troops were lying in ambush not far from the broken intestine cliff. When the time was right, they would come out to rescue them. This group of black-robed men were also Feng Zhiqing's men, and they knew what they would face in the end, death. Chapter 422. Sometimes, even Shen Yueji herself did not understand what benefits Feng Zhiqing had given them. However, some people were like this. Even if you could not give them anything, they would still inexplicably feel that you were good for them. They would die for you without any complaints, without any hesitation, and even sacrifice their lives for you. Shen Yueji was carefully protected behind the man. There was a faint smell of blood on his body. Wounds could be seen everywhere on his body. His snow-white robe had long been dyed red with blood, and his hair was also a little messy. Your Majesty, I am not afraid. As a woman of the military family, even if I die standing, I will never kneel and beg for mercy. They are here for me. It has nothing to do with you. As long as I am here, I will not let you suffer any harm. Dog of an emperor, did you ever think that this day would come when you killed more than 100 people of my Lu family? The leader of the men in black pointed his sword at Feng Zhiqing. Shen Yueji didn't know why, but even though she knew he was the one who planned everything, she still felt the man standing in front of her suddenly stiffen. After Feng Zhiqing ascended to the throne, he had killed countless prestigious officials in the court within 3 days. Even their wives and children were not spared. At that time, he told the outside world that these people were conspiring to rebel and secretly did things that were detrimental to Feng country and the people of the capital. Therefore, he ordered them to be beheaded to give an explanation to the people. She was not the only one who was paraded on the streets. These officials who had once sacrificed their lives for Feng country were also paraded on the streets. The people carried baskets of rotten eggs and wild vegetables and threw them at the officials who were locked in cages. They seemed to have forgotten that during their most difficult times, it was these officials who cared for them and used their salaries to help them. They also seemed to have forgotten that when they were short of food, those officials would rather starve themselves to take care of these people. This was also why Shen Yueji did not like to be associated with others. So what if you treated some people well? She was not you, and you were not him. You would never be people of the same world. Some people were good, and some people were evil. An arrow shot toward Feng Zhiqing. Feng Zhiqing did not know what was going on. Perhaps it was because of what the black-clad man had said earlier, but Feng Zhiqing did not react in time. He stood there motionlessly. Li Yingying, who was in the carriage, was already burning with anxiety. She couldn't care less as she shouted, "Your Majesty, be careful." Shen Yueji also came back to her senses at this time. She pushed Feng Zhiqing heavily. The unprepared man staggered from the push, and because of her habit, she gave all her strength to him. Under the man's shocked gaze, she was only an arm's length away from the sharp sword. However, she leaned backwards. Ug. This time, Feng Zhiqing's calm eyes finally showed some emotion. It was as if the scene before his eyes overlapped with the scene from a few years ago. There was also a person who, in order to push away that fatal arrow, allowed her delicate body to fall down the cliff. At that time, he had a budget, and he pulled her back in time. But this time, he threw himself on the cliff and grabbed Shin Yueji's hand. His arm was dripping with blood, and the hand on his hand was holding Shin Yueji tightly. Was it because of a scheme, or because of something else, or perhaps it was because of his relationship with her? Chapter 424. This Chia can feel the Emperor's nostalgia and love for the late Empress. Sometimes, this Chia feels jealous. In this Chia's eyes, even older sister Empress doesn't seem to be as important as a dead person in the Emperor's heart. I also want your Majesty to remember that even if your Majesty doesn't love me, I can do what the former Empress can do for your Majesty. I can die for your Majesty. I cannot distract your Majesty. Shin Yueji. I order you to climb up. Your Majesty, if there is a next life, I hope that you will no longer be the Emperor, and I will not be a woman from a family of generals. We will just be a couple from an ordinary family. The last sentence was a little fake, but also a little sincere. Shin Yueji just couldn't accept it. She was loyal to him, but why did she end up like this in the end? Even if she didn't love him anymore, she still wanted to ask for an explanation. She wanted to know, if they were just a couple from an ordinary family, would he still use her so much? Would he treat her sincerely? Or, could it be that he still had his own ambition? Would he give himself to someone else and get what he deserved in return? He would climb up step by step. Even if he wasn't the Emperor, he would climb to the highest position. That was him. Your Majesty, your hand is bleeding, and I feel distressed. I like you so much, I won't let your hand be ruined because of me. She opened the man's big hand, one by one, under the man's dark eyes. The man's eyes widened, and his thin lips almost turned red. Shin Yueji. The three words were squeezed out from the gap of his teeth, and then he saw that his already numb hand was opened by her, and her whole body was falling uncontrollably. Her beautiful dress had been dyed red with blood, and even her plain face was covered with his blood. There was a smile at the corner of her mouth, as if it was a lifetime ago. He seemed to see the woman who, for him, no matter how much she suffered, would raise her head to smile at him quietly, and say that she was fine. At that moment, his heart suddenly hurt so much that he felt like he was about to suffocate. He rubbed his chest, and it felt like someone was pulling at his heart over and over again, causing him to feel endless pain and torment. However, it didn't want his life. How did this happen? Things shouldn't have developed this way. There should have been another ending. It shouldn't have been like this. He would have been fine, Shin Yueji would have been fine, and they would all be fine. This wasn't the ending he wanted. It wasn't. His hidden guards, who were lying in ambush not far away, had all arrived, and the group of black-clothed men were quickly subdued. He looked at the leader of the black-robed men and walked toward him. He used his sword to lift the black veil on his face. It was a completely unfamiliar face, and it was filled with hatred. It was so undisguised that it shocked him so much that he took several steps back. It was an unfamiliar face, but it was familiar to him. The eldest son of the Liu family, Liu Tiancheng, he was a person who had been dead for a long time. Dog Emperor, you didn't expect this, did you? Liu Tiancheng looked up to the sky and laughed. The group of black-clothed men that you meticulously plotted against had already been killed by me. What a pity that I didn't take your life. But fortunately, he killed a woman. If I didn't guess wrongly, that woman was old General Shin's beloved daughter, Shin Yueji, right? Ha ha ha. Chapter 425. He laughed until tears came out of his eyes. Looking at Feng Zhiqing's dark eyes, he didn't even bother to talk nonsense. He directly bit the poison in his mouth and died with blood flowing out of his 7 orifices. He had never thought of going back alive from this assassination. He knew that with his martial arts, he would not be Feng Zhiqing's opponent. Even if it was a meticulous plan, he still wouldn't be able to kill Feng Jiuqing. But for him, it was enough. All of this was enough. Feng Jiuqing staggered and lost his former gentleness and elegance. Qiu Yang saw that there was something wrong with him and quickly went forward to support him. Your Majesty, this subordinate was negligent this time. This subordinate will definitely order a thorough investigation to see who leaked the information. As for Imperial concubine Shen, send someone to look for her. Your Majesty. If she's alive, I want to see her corpse. Yes. Qiu Yang didn't dare to hesitate and led the men in black behind him to search. The broken intestines cliff was so high that it looked like it was shrouded in fog from top to bottom. There was fog everywhere. Even if a person with good qigong fell down, it would be difficult to escape death, let alone a woman like Shen Yueji. On the steep cliff, Shen Yueji looked at the man who was holding her in his arms. His chiseled facial features were cold, and his thin lips were pursed into a straight line. His black eyes were filled with endless hostility. If it weren't for the fact that he was tightening his grip on her hand, she would have thought that the man in front of her had become a walking corpse. Mo Wushang, why are you here? The two of them fell into the dark cave. The man hadn't put her down yet, but Shen Yueji had already jumped down from his arms and looked at him up and down. The man raised his eyebrows and looked at her coldly. If I'm not here, where do you think I should be? Have you been waiting here for a long time? The man didn't speak, but his cold aura was the best response to Shen Yueji's question. Not only had he been guarding here since a long time ago, deeply afraid that something would happen to her, he had even heard every word that she had said to Feng Jiuqing. Not a single word was missed. She knew he was worried about her. Shen Yueji wiped the blood off her face. I have my own plans, and I've been here before, so I know where to hide. I won't fall to my death. Even if you don't catch me, I'll be fine. At most, when she rolled inside, her wrist would be scratched a little, but this was nothing to Shen Yueji. But seeing the man's face, which was obviously not easy to get along with, if he could freeze just now, not to mention freezing now, he would even implicate others to be frozen together with him. Mo Wushang, what's wrong? I've already said that I know what I'm doing and that I won't hurt myself. In your heart, what exactly do you think I am? Why didn't you discuss such a dangerous matter with me? Or do you think that I don't have the qualifications to protect you? I didn't, you. If I didn't come here in person, would you let me know that Feng Jiuqing sent a message to the world saying that you fell off the cliff in order to save him? Mo Wushang, what's wrong with you? The next moment, the man gripped her wrist tightly, not allowing her to break free at all. The man pulled her into his arms and hugged her tightly. His cold face was devoid of warmth as he buried his face in her neck. I don't want to lose you again. Do you know that losing you once, I'm like a walking corpse? Chapter 426. Now that I've finally managed to keep you by my side, don't make me feel afraid, okay? I've said it before, Mo Wushang, I know what I'm doing. Before this, you also promised me that you wouldn't interfere in my affairs. I have my reasons for doing this. Moreover, you're so busy every day and have your own things to do. I don't want you to spend all your time on me. This will make me feel, how can anything compare to you, You know that I don't care about anything. I only care about you. I don't need to do anything. I just want to stay by your side, accompany you, take care of you, and not let anyone hurt you. But you keep rejecting me. In your heart, I've never existed, right? No matter what you do, you disdain to mention it to me. Even if you put your life on the line, I don't deserve to know, right? Men were born to be people of few words. In both her previous lives, the only change was that Mo Wushang was more thick-skinned and shameless when he spoke to her. But sometimes, his words were still pitifully few. But he wouldn't say so much to her all at once like today. Moreover, they were all words from his heart. That dull and low voice was full of helplessness and pain, just like a person who had been abandoned by her. Shin Yueji was just about to push him away and explain when she was caught off guard. She felt a warm sensation on her neck. She was shocked. He's crying. She felt the man's tears falling on her neck. 1 drop, 2 drop, soaking her neck until it was boiling hot. For a moment, she was dumbfounded. She stood rooted to the ground, not knowing what to say or how to react. After a long time, the man hugged her without letting go. It was so long that Shin Yueji didn't know how long it had been. In short, she felt that a long time had passed. Mo Wusheng, I really didn't mean to hide it from you. To me, it's really a small matter. I care about my life more than anyone else. How can I put myself in danger? I didn't tell you because I can do it on my own. I don't need to rely on men to do what I want to do. Secondly, I've wasted too much of your time these days. I know that you have a lot of things to deal with in private, so I really don't want to trouble you. I'm sorry for making you worry. I promise I won't do it again. Shin Yueji's heart is very uncomfortable, but she still grabs the man's sleeve. Next time, if there is such a thing, I will discuss it with you personally. Don't be angry, okay? She struggled to get up from the man's arms. However, the man hugged her tightly and didn't give her a chance to break free. That tight strength seemed to want to melt her into his bones. Mo Wusheng, you've hugged me for so long. My body is covered in blood. I want to find a place with water to clean myself. I feel very uncomfortable like this. The man hugged her and did not have the slightest intention of letting go. Hey, don't you think the smell of blood on my body is disgusting? As long as it's from you, it won't smell bad. The man was silent for a long time before he spoke. Shin Yueji suddenly laughed. I'm not that stupid to make myself bleed. The blood on this body belongs to Feng Juqing. As long as you don't mind. Sure enough, before she could finish speaking, the man picked her up. Chapter 427. Shin Yueji was shocked. Mo Wusheng, what are you doing? Put me down first. The road is slippery, I'll take you to find water. Obviously, the man was very familiar with the geography of the Broken Intestines cliff. He carried her down the steep slope, through a green forest, and Shin Yueji could hear the sound of water from afar. It was sloping down from a high place. It was a waterfall as high as 10 people. How do you know this place? You used to come here often. Putting her down from his arms, Mo Wusheng did not speak, but just stared at the rapid flow of water from above. When Feng Juqing and her met with an accident at the Broken Intestines cliff, he was in the dark. If Feng Juqing did not protect him, he would protect her. He also saw with his own eyes the dependence and deep love in her eyes for the man. At the moment of crisis, it was he who held her hand and pulled her up from the steep cliff. Just now, the scene from a few years ago was repeated, but this time, it was she who personally opened the man's hand. Even when she said those words of deep love to him, Mo Wusheng could no longer see the affectionate look she had when she faced Feng Juqing a few years ago. Her heart, as expected, no longer had him. It could not be said that there was no him, perhaps there was still him, but this deep love, unswerving love, was gradually being ground down, slowly disappearing. The smell of blood, and the blood on her face, a lot of it dried on her face. Shin Yueji was a little disgusted by this sticky smell and touch. Walking to the river, she first washed the serum on her face, and the hem of her clean dress was also stained with blood. She took off her coat, as if she was going to the river to wash when the man did not exist. The man stood 3 steps away from her. Perhaps because some of the blood had soaked through her clothes and touched her skin, Shin Yueji began to hesitate before she made the final move. She looked back at the man 3 steps away from her. Mo Wushang, I want to take a bath, stay away from me, don't peek. The man slightly raised his eyebrows, his handsome face expressionless, but he stood there with his own thoughts, not moving. Mo Wushang. Shin Yueji gritted her teeth and shouted, did you hear what I said? I want to take a bath, stay away from me, don't peek. There are wild beasts passing by at the foot of the mountain. I will guard you here, or else you will not be safe. Have you ever seen a beast that isn't afraid of water? Besides, if she went into the water, the beasts wouldn't be able to swim. Even if there were beasts, they wouldn't be able to do anything to her. The man paused and frowned. There are snakes in the water and many unknown poisonous things. Shin Yueji, she held a handful of water and waved it towards the man. Only a few drops of water splashed on his handsome face. The man didn't dodge. He stood where he was. In order to make it easier for her to splash him with water later, he took 2 steps forward. Shin Yueji lost her temper because of his subconscious shameless action. Forget it. She muttered to herself. It wasn't like she hadn't seen it before. She took off her inner clothes. When she was only left with a small dudu, she hesitated. The man behind her was even more terrifying and savage than a beast in her heart. She put the clean clothes on the shore and waded into the water. Mo Wushang looked at the clothes she had neatly piled on the shore. The clothes were wet in many places, and he remembered that she would have to wear clothes after taking a bath. She would catch a cold wearing these wet clothes. Chapter 428. His dark eyes dimmed a little. He stepped forward, picked up the clothes she had taken off on the shore, and then turned to go elsewhere. Shin Yueji didn't dare to soak in the water for too long. Perhaps it was because of Mo Wushang's words that there was something scary in the water. She took a quick bath and swam back to the shore until the sticky smell of blood on her body dissipated. What are you doing? She looked at the clothes that the man handed to her. Shin Yueji took it. There was still heat on it. For a moment, she couldn't tell what she was feeling. She just said, did you dry my clothes? The clothes are damp. You will catch a cold if you wear them. The man gave a brief explanation. Seeing Shin Yueji come out of the water, he consciously turned around and let her put on her clothes first. Mo Wushang, why are you here? Is it because you are worried about me? After she put on her clothes, Mo Wushang turned to look at her. There was a rare seriousness and gentlemanly look on his handsome face. But the way he looked at her was clearly saying, otherwise. Didn't Hong Fui come to you for something? I can't go back now. I can only go back after Feng Jiuqing sends someone to find me. Maybe I will have to stay here for a few days. You can go back first. Don't worry about me. Before she finished speaking, the man hugged her waist again. He didn't say anything, but it was better than talking. Shin Yueji could feel that as long as she was here, the man would not leave. She felt warm and sad in her heart. Such a good man, why did she put all her heart on Feng Jiuqing and not look at him more? If she had fallen in love with Mo Wushang, would nothing have happened? Maybe she and Mo Wushang now. She clutched the man's collar tightly. Mo Wushang, can you not be so good to me? It was so good that she didn't know how to refuse his kindness. She could only accept it with a clear conscience. She said that she was willing to accept him, but she didn't know how long she could hold on and what the consequences would be. The man looked down at her, his black eyes as bright as stars. His tight lips eased a little because of the anger just now. You only realize that I am so good to you now. Shin Yueji subconsciously grabbed his collar. I realized it a long time ago. Why are you so nice to me? What if I can't give you what you want? Knows what I want. Looking at his handsome face, Shin Yueji choked for a moment, her face inexplicably hot. In case I can't give it to you. Carrying her into the cave, Mo Wushang took off his outer robe and placed it on a hard rock before placing her on it. As Shin Yueji sat on it, the man's tall body also pressed down. Shin Yueji was startled and subconsciously placed her hands on his chest. Mo Wushang, don't mess around, her lips were blocked. Unlike the previous few kisses, the man's kiss this time was gentle with a hint of roughness. It was as if a storm had suddenly started after the calm of the storm. Shin Yueji's hands were restrained by the man and she could not move. She kept her mouth shut and did not want the man to come in. Who knew that he would directly touch her chest with one hand? Seeing that she still didn't let go, his other large hand wandered around her body wantonly, vaguely showing signs of moving downwards. Mo Wushang, don't. The tip of the man's tongue slipped in as he wished and entangled with her. After the kiss, it felt like an eternity. Shin Yueji did not know how much time had passed. Chapter 429. She licked her lips, which were numb from his kiss, and complained, haven't I coaxed you? Why are you angry again? I just apologized to you. The man snorted, who accepted your apology? Listening to his tough tone, Shin Yueji also became angry, this is my own business. If you can't stand it, then don't look. Who asked you to intervene? I'm not a fool. Even if you didn't come, I wouldn't let myself get hurt. When she met the man's dark eyes, Shin Yueji swallowed the words that were on the tip of her tongue. She sat on the stone and turned her back to him. She didn't know how long it took, until her waist was held in the man's arms. Her nose was full of the man's scent. She heard the man's helpless sigh from above her head. Shin Yueji's nose was sour, and she was stuffy in his arms. Don't be angry, okay? You usually indulge me. You will make me feel that you don't care about me. The man rubbed her head. In your heart, is my love for you so unbearable? Who asked you to be angry with me? I heard that most men are narrow-minded when they are angry with women. Now you know I'm narrow-minded. Shin Yueji, if you want to be angry, then be angry. I won't coax you anymore. Mo Wushang, since you are so difficult to please, why are you still here? Go back to your regent's mansion immediately. I don't need you to accompany me. Shin Yueji finally calmed down. Because of the man's words and the obvious sharp tone, she pushed him away discontentedly and got up from the man's arms. When she saw that the man really didn't say a word this time, nor did he come forward to ask her to stay, but turned around and left the cave. The strong and tall figure slowly disappeared from her sight. Shin Yueji's eyes turned red in an instant. There were countless waves rolling in her heart, which was very unpleasant. Under her body, the man considerately took off the robe for her to prevent her from catching a cold. She could still smell the man's unique scent when she touched it. She knew that the man was angry for her own good. He blamed her for not discussing with him in advance and taking such a big risk. If anything happened, she might not even be able to save her own life. Shin Yueji knew everything, but she was still stubborn, especially when she saw the man was angry but still held back. In her heart, she was happy that the man cared so much about her. Perhaps it was because she was used to hearing the gentle and lingering tone of the man when he spoke to her, she could not accept him suddenly being a little more firm. She wiped the corners of her eyes and found that there were really tears flowing out. She picked up the clothes on the rock and was about to chase after them, but when she ran out of the cave, she hesitated. She uncontrollably withdrew her legs and feet in time. She sat back down in the distance, feeling lost. She held the man's clothes in her arms. Sitting on the hard and damp stone was not comfortable at all. She was wondering if she had really gone too far this time, but she did all this just to gain Feng Juqing's trust. Even if his trust was zero, there had never been a woman who would throw away her life for him at such a critical moment. In the past, he was the one who protected her, but now, it was another woman who protected him. She was taking a step on her own path of revenge. In the future, such things would happen again, whether there was Imo Wuxiang or not. The woman in front of him was someone he would love for the rest of his life. How could he bear to lose his temper at her? He was just angry at himself. Even if he were to lose his temper, it would only be directed at him. It had nothing to do with her. Even going out was to vent his frustrations. He didn't want to scare her with his appearance. Because he had lost once, Mo Wuxiang didn't want to go through it a second time. His whole heart was in his throat. He could lose the world, but he couldn't lose her. Chapter 432. She glared at the man in front of her. When have you ever let yourself be taken advantage of? Tell me, what are you up to this time? No other ideas, doesn't feel sorry for me. Looking at his aggrieved expression, Shin Yueji's heart softened. She quickly touched his face. Okay, I'm afraid of you. Tell me, does it still hurt? Did you see a doctor and apply medicine? The man shook his head. Shin Yueji glared at him. Then what do you want? Kiss me. Shin Yueji's face immediately heated up when she realized that he was asking her to kiss him there. Yet, this man looked so serious and said such serious words. Looking at his serious face, it was as if she was the one who thought wrong and the man was just saying it casually. After helping him put on his clothes, Shin Yueji began to eat the roasted rabbit meat. Forget it, I don't feel sorry for you anyway. If you want to die, go ahead. If you die, I will remarry. Mo Wuxiang was speechless. Looking at the little woman he missed sitting in front of him and eating with relish, the man's dark eyes were deep and dark. She really didn't care about him. In this wilderness, Shin Yueji suddenly realized that although the man was not good at cooking, he was quite good at roasting things. She did not know what he had sprinkled on the rabbit meat, but it did not taste sweet. Instead, the taste was moderate and exceptionally delicious. Mo Wuxiang, are you busy now? The man replied angrily. Not busy. Not busy. Since you're not busy, then go catch another rabbit for me to roast. You're not going. If you don't want to go, then forget it. After eating, I will go catch one myself. Anyway, there are many wild beasts in this wilderness. If you are not worried that I will. Before she could finish, she saw the man suddenly stand up, obviously to catch a rabbit. As he stood up, Shin Yueji quickly stood up and ran in front of him, blocking his way. Mo Wuxiang stood where he was and stared at her for a while. He frowned in confusion. Go and catch it now. Clean it and come back to roast it. It just so happens that you are almost done eating. Shin Yueji didn't say anything. Instead, she raised her greasy little hand and suddenly wrapped it around the man's neck. Her little mouth covered in rabbit grease sealed the man's thin lips. Feeling the man's tall and sturdy body, she was startled. Shin Yueji stopped and then left the man's lips. Is it delicious? For some strange reason, the man nodded stiffly. Shin Yueji's eyes carried a smile. She moved closer and bit the man's thin lips again. Does the wound on your chest still hurt? The man shook his head. Then, Shin Yueji kissed him again. Do you still think I have no conscience? Yes. This time, the man reacted quickly. Shin Yueji stuffed a mouthful of rabbit meat into his mouth and said, Good boy, let's go catch some rabbits. Chapter 433. Shin Yueji realized that she didn't feel cold at all. She didn't know if it was because of the barbecued meat, but she felt warm in her heart and body. Shin Yueji didn't know if it was because of her quarrel with the man, but she didn't feel cold at all. Instead, she felt warm in her heart and body. Your Majesty, there is a secret report from the palace. There is an urgent matter that requires you to return to the palace as soon as possible. Above the broken heart cliff. Feng Jiuqing's bloody clothes had been cleaned and even the wounds on his body had been bandaged. It had been nearly 4 hours since Shin Yueji fell off the cliff. The secret guards he sent down to search for her were still nowhere to be found. Qiu Yang saw him like this and remembered the secret report from the palace. He couldn't help but remind him, Your Majesty, Imperial concubine Shin is a good person, she will be fine. Dozens of well-trained secret guards with high martial arts skills have gone down from here to search for her, but now there is no trace of her. Yueji is just a woman, no one knew better than him how high the broken heart cliff was. He originally had his own plan, but he didn't expect that Shin Yueji didn't act according to his original plan. He thought that all women in this world were afraid of death. They liked glory and wealth and relied on their husbands. Even Gu Yuqin, who used to be the center of everything, was nothing more than this. So he felt that she was boring. Even if she liked him to the point that she would give everything for him, but he didn't love her. Perhaps he still cared about her a little. He cared about how much she cared about him and how much she liked him. He cared about how obedient she was. Perhaps, in his heart, she was still better than those women. After all, she had been with him since he had nothing. But he also didn't expect that a daughter born in a family of generals, who had lived a luxurious life since she was young, never suffered any hardships or grievances, would be willing to die to protect him. Even Gu Yuqin couldn't do it. A few years ago, he held Gu Yuqin's hand. She was also at the bottom of the broken heart cliff, looking at his body full of injuries. She also cried and begged him to let go. But at that moment, how could he really let go? Even though his body was in pain, even though countless wounds had opened up, he did not let go of her hand. It was just that his plan was to pull her up from the bottom. He wanted her to devote all of her loyalty to him. But Shin Yueji, however, she pried open her fingers and pried open his fingers one by one. Then, she fell off the cliff. Feng Jiuqing didn't know what was going on, but he felt like he was possessed by a demon. It was like he was in a dream. He was so deep in a dream that he couldn't tell if the scene before him was something that had happened a few years ago, or if it was something that was happening right now. Emperor. Qiu Yang looked at him worriedly. Of course, he also knew that if Shin Yueji fell off this high cliff, she would be smashed to pieces. But when he saw Feng Jiuqing's appearance, he was still a little shocked. The emperor had always been the center of the court affairs. All these years, he had always kept it in his heart. Even the late empress didn't let the emperor put aside the government affairs and put her in charge. But now, he had mentioned the secret report from the palace twice in front of the emperor, but he didn't get any response from the man. It seemed that he didn't hear it, but he also seemed to hear it. But his heart was at the bottom of the cliff, and his heart had already been hooked by the person below. Chapter 434. Your Majesty. Qiu Yang was worried, so he called out again. Feng Jiuqing seemed to come back to his senses. His eyes were scarlet and bloodshot. Your Majesty, Imperial concubine will be fine. She is so kind and I believe that God will take care of her. Li Yingying got out of the carriage. She still had a lingering fear after what had happened just now. Her face was pale. Naturally, she had seen the scene where Shin Yueji fell off the cliff to protect her man. She was shocked. She had suspected that she had no feelings for the emperor, but now she was willing to die for him. Since she cared about him so much, why did she bring her into the palace to seduce the emperor? Feng Jiuqing saw her familiar face. He didn't know what was wrong with him. Suddenly, he stepped forward and took Li Yingying into his arms. Hugging her tightly, he hugged her tightly. He had always been fearless in the face of danger, but today he lost his composure. Qin, is that you? You're back. Your Majesty, Li Yingying couldn't breathe because of him. She started to struggle in his arms. Your Majesty, I'm Yingying. You've mistaken me for someone else. Your Majesty. When she saw Qiu Yang behind him through the man's body, the latter covered his mouth and coughed softly. He said respectfully, Your Highness, there is an important matter in the palace that requires the emperor to return to the palace to deal with in time. Please help me persuade the emperor to return to the palace as soon as possible. Li Yingying knew that Qiu Yang's words were for her, but she was shocked. She didn't know how to answer him. After all, she wasn't the real empress. Moreover, the emperor was conscious. He just thought she was the former empress at this moment. If she rashly, but when she met Qiu Yang's pleading eyes, Amitabha. Benefactor Qiu is right. Please help me persuade the emperor to return to the palace. Guard Qiu is guarding here. If Miss Shen is found, Guard Qiu will inform the emperor as soon as possible. Kong Yin got out of the carriage. He had seen so much excitement, but he didn't intervene. He had been watching the show with folded arms. Yesterday, he had already told Shen Yueji everything. He believed that Shen Yueji's choice was all within her plans, but he had never imagined that she would put on such a show. She was returning everything that Feng Jiuqing had given her. He couldn't help but rejoice that he had chosen to rely on this woman. Sure enough, after 9 years of marriage, in terms of understanding, he really couldn't compare to Shen Yueji. Seeing that even the emperor's most valued great master Kong Yin was begging her, and seeing the young emperor's pitiful appearance, Li Yingying couldn't bear to see him like this. She gathered her courage and reached out to caress the man's back. Your Majesty, let's return to the palace first. Nothing will happen to the imperial consort. Bodyguard Qiu will be here to guard her for you. General's residence. From the moment the emperor's carriage was attacked on the Broken Heart Cliff to the moment Shen Yueji fell off the cliff, the people in the general's mansion immediately received the news. However, at this moment, the general's residence was as stable as Mount Tai. No one was anxious. I never thought that the Prince Regent would go in person. General, Madam, what do you think? Did the son-in-law do well this time? Double Happiness dutifully poured tea for the two of them. Shen He took a sip calmly and crossed his legs. Not bad, not bad. I didn't choose the wrong son-in-law. Sure enough, the Prince Regent understands me the most. Chapter 435. Madam, and the Prince Regent are down there, a man and a woman alone. What if? You're not serious, what are you talking about? Shen Qiu, who was drinking tea, listened to his words and almost threw it at him. If not for our people guarding below, if they knew that fell off the cliff, you say, what is this girl doing? Why didn't she suddenly tell us? We almost thought that the old-haired person is going to die before the black-haired person. My daughter is really smart. She made such a scene and saved the emperor. In this way, won't the emperor like her even more? Oh, by the way, Double Happiness, where did your young master go? Oh, young master. Double Happiness poured another cup of tea for Madam Shen and said, he knew that something happened to Mississippi. He fell off the cliff and went to the street to cry. If General's wife thinks it's embarrassing, I can pull young master back, but I may not be able to do it alone. General and Madam must send more people to help me. Shen Yueqi pulled a few of his old friends and cried on the street. The common people in the capital didn't know what had happened, but after he did this, they all knew that the eldest daughter of the Shin family had fallen off the cliff to save the emperor, and her life was uncertain. Shin Yueji's feat was praised by the people in the capital. They didn't expect the eldest daughter of the Shin family to be so heroic. She was not weaker than a man. She was indeed the daughter of the Shin family. Shin Yueji cried his heart out on the street. Occasionally, a few pedestrians would come over to comfort him. As a result, Shin Yueji wiped his tears and snot on his body. They quickly walked away with a black face and didn't even want to talk to him. After crying for a long time, Shin Yueji saw the corner of a white robe appear in front of him. Looking up from the corner of the robe, he saw Shang Guanyu's handsome face covered in scarlet. He used to be gentle and refined, but now he was like a wolf and a wild beast. He looked very different from his usual amiable and approachable self. If he used to be a docile cat, now he looked like a crazy tiger. When Shin Yueji saw him, he only glanced at him before withdrawing his gaze and continuing to sit on the ground, wailing loudly. After crying for a while, he found that Shang Guanyu was still staring at him. He stopped crying and looked up at him. "Young Master Shangguan, are you going to sit here and cry with me?" Her voice was sobbing as if she had suffered a great grievance. Shang Guanyu's face did not change much. It was still the same face as before, cold as frost, so stiff that it seemed as if only a layer of dry skin was left. If not for his scarlet eyes, Shin Yueji would have thought that the man in front of her was just an empty shell that could not move, a body without a soul. Shang Guanyu's thin lips moved slightly, and it took him a long time to say something. He squatted in front of Shin Yueji and held his shoulders with his big palms. "Tell me. She's not real. Is not real. She." His strength made Shin Yueji's face change color. If he hadn't cried for a long time and didn't have any strength, he would have slapped him back. He looked terrible. "I've cried like this. How can it be fake? My sister is a first-class imperial concubine in the Feng country. Who would dare to make fun of her? I just pity my sister." Chapter 436. 2 lines of tears slid down Shin Yueji's cheeks. She's gone at such a young age. As her brother, I'm going to die before him. Father and mother will only have me as their only son. Sob, sob, sob. No, it's impossible, it's impossible. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. How could something happen to Ji-er? It can't be. Ji-er won't die. She won't die. How is it possible? Shang Guanyu murmured to himself as he staggered and fell backward. Shin Yueji watched as his body fell back powerlessly. His face was deathly pale and bloodless. He sat on the ground and cried. Because he had fallen on the ground, his palms were bleeding from being cut by the stones. His snow-white robe was also stained with dust, causing his body to become a lot dirtier. But he didn't seem to feel it. He struggled to get up from the ground and walked forward with difficulty. Shin Yueji didn't know where he was going. He called him a few times, but he didn't respond. He was like an emotionless puppet with no soul and only a body before. Now, he gave Shin Yueji the illusion that very soon, he wouldn't even have this physical body anymore. He had seen Shang Guanyu's love for Ji-er for so many years. He had always been free to let it go. Because Ji-er didn't like him, he never paid attention to Shang Guanyu. He didn't observe Shang Guanyu carefully. He only knew that there was such a person who had been pestering Ji-er. This was the first time that Shin Yueji looked at him seriously. After all, he was the eldest son of the Shangguan family and the only son of the family. He couldn't die like this. It was true that Ji-er faked her death. What if he really killed Shang Guanyu? Thinking of this, Xinhuiqi cried enough. He quickly got up from the ground and chased after Shangguanyu. Shangguanyu stumbled and swayed as he walked aimlessly. There seemed to be a road of no return in front of him, and there seemed to be nails under his feet. He couldn't even walk steadily. Xinhuiqi knew that he couldn't respond to him. In order to not attract too much attention, he didn't call out to him either. He just followed behind him, following him all the way to the wilderness, through the forest, to a deserted place with few people, and then through the mountains and rivers, to the broken heart cliff. He only relied on his footsteps to run all the way. He didn't feel tired at all. It felt like he was a puppet being controlled by someone else. He was muttering Ji-er's name. As he passed through the forest, a wild beast rushed up to bite him. He didn't resist, letting the beast bite his arm. He didn't seem to feel any pain. For a moment, Xinhuiqi thought that he was going to be eaten by the beast. His bloody arms were all bitten by wild beasts. Later, Xinhuiqi found out that Shangguanyu really wanted to be eaten by wild beasts. He wanted to die. It was as if the thing he had been chasing for his whole life had suddenly disappeared and would never appear in this world again. He had lost all hope of living, so, Xinhuiqi was horrified. He didn't expect that this skinny man would have such deep feelings for his little sister. It was as if he was possessed. If it wasn't for Mo Wuxiang, he really couldn't help but try to matchmake Mo Wuxiang and his little sister. In the future, his little sister would marry such a man. She would be the head of the family, and this man would also do his best to pamper and protect her. He would never let her suffer any grievances. What a shame.